Hello, welcome to Ham Radio Basics. Whether you've had your license for a while and just hadn't really gotten on the air, or you're new to ham radio and ready to make that first contact, this is the series for you. So let's see what we've got going with K5ATA Ham Radio. Today, we're taking a look and trying to figure out how exactly you want to operate your ham radio. You've got your license, and it's time to decide how exactly or what exactly is it that you want to do with it. So let's take a look today on K5ATA ham radio. One of the first questions you need to ask yourself is where you want to operate. Do you want to be able to operate, as you walk around town with a handheld? Would you rather operate in your car? Maybe you want to operate at home. Maybe you want to operate in all three. How you choose or how you answer that question determines what kind of radio you need to look at getting. So let's take a look at some of the modes, and so we can kind of get an understanding as to what it is you want. First, you have Vhf Uhf Communications. Most of the activity there on repeaters and stuff is going to be in the VHF area, the 2 meter band. If you're looking to drive around town, talk on the radio, maybe talk to some buddies on the way to work, working on repeaters, this is an option for you. And there are a couple different ways you can do this. You can do this in a mobile radio, which is mounted in your car, or you can do it with a handheld radio, which you can stick on your belt. Whichever way you decide, you need to understand there are limitations to different radios. For example, a handheld radio is significantly more limited in range than a mobile radio. However, the handheld radio is significantly more portable than a mobile radio as well. I can take this radio and go hiking, go fishing, wander around town, and have it with me all the time and hardly notice it's there. I can't exactly lug around a mobile radio that puts out 50 watts. The next thing you need to consider is whether you want to be able to operate VHF Uhf at home. If so, that kind of begs a different question. How are you going to power it at home? In your car, a mobile radio is pretty easy to figure out. You wire the power plug, through the firewall or whatever, take it to the battery or to your fuse box, boom, you're in business. It runs off of that 12-volt system. At home, though, you don't have a 12-volt plug. So you have to have some way to power that. That also adds an additional cost. If you're going to do that, you need to get a power supply. Depending on what power supply you get, that can set you back $50, $100, even more, depending on which one you get. So take that into consideration. It can cost a good bit more to get on the air at home. But then again, you have the convenience of being at home with your own coffee pot. One of the next options you want to look at is maybe you have some HF privileges. Even technicians get a little bit of HF privilege in there. Maybe you have your general and you've got a pretty good number of HF privileges there. Do you want to be able to work on the high frequency bands? Do you want to be able to work, 10 meters, 20 meters, 40 meters, 80 meters? If so, that's a whole different cup of tea. There's a lot to be done on the HF bands. You can work voice, you can work data, you can work Morse code. Whichever way you choose changes the way you're going to operate a little bit. If you're going to operate HF voice, that's usually on sideband, single sideband, and depending on where it is, it's going to be either upper sideband or lower sideband. You need certain radios to be able to do that. You also need antennas. Okay, you'll hear a lot of people tell you, buy a less expensive radio and get a better antenna. And there's a lot of truth to that, because you can do a lot more with a lot more antenna than you can with a shoddy antenna and a really expensive radio. So some of the fun stuff you can do on HF. You can chase DX. That's, distance communications. It's a lot of fun for a lot of people. I enjoy it. I like getting on the radio and seeing, how far I can talk that day. Can I get that guy that's in Africa? Can I get the guy in Kuwait? Can I get, Russia? You can work the world with HF, and it changes all the time depending on the bands and the propagation. The atmosphere, everything plays into it and changes what you can do. There are a lot of contests that exist on the HF bands. You can have, there are contests almost every weekend, it seems. Like right now, there's a QSO party. I forget for which state, but somebody's having one. There's field day. You can get active in field day, and everybody's on the radio, it seems, on field day. All of that activity tends to happen on the HF bands. The ARRL has several awards that you can win too. You can go for worked all states. Can you actually work all 50 states? It's a lot harder than it seems because, for example, it took me forever to nail down North Dakota. Then you can even get more specific. Can you work all 50 states on a certain band or in a certain mode? Worked all zones, there's worked all grids, there's a bunch of different awards that you can chase after and try to get. 100 countries, DXCC. That's another one that you pretty much have to be on HF to work that. But it's a lot of there's a lot of challenge to it, and there's a lot of fun trying to chase that country you don't have yet. That level of excitement when you're chasing Poland or whatever the country is, and all of a sudden, boom, you see it pop up on a spotting software or something, and you go try to jump in the pileup and see if you can get them. You can also work CW or Morse code on the HF bands. Now, with Morse code, you actually have the ability to communicate farther with less. You can work the world on what they call QRP with Morse code, and that's 5-10 watts. You can set up shack with CW. You can operate with a radio about the size of this Altoids tin. You can have a headset hooked up, a little more key paddle, and throw a wire into a tree, and you can spend days with people piled up trying to get you. There's a lot of activities you can do that lend themselves to, Morse code, summits on the air. People that climb these mountains and try to activate different mountaintops. Well, you don't want to climb a mountain carrying 100 pounds worth of gear. But a few ounces of gear, that's a little more doable. Another mode you might want to consider is digital radio. Now, there are a few different flavors of that. There's DMR. There's Yaesu has their version, Fusion. There's D-Star with ICOM. These modes, what they do is it's kind of a hybrid. What it does is it takes RF, and it takes that RF and it pipes it into the internet, and it spits it back out all over the world, wherever anybody's got that same talk group or that same reflector. Some people, that's their thing. Some people, it's not. I kind of like it myself. I like listening to the worldwide talk group while I'm driving to work. I like the fact that I might just have a conversation with some guy in the UK, just casually driving down the road. The advantage of that is you can work the world with a handheld radio. It does take a little bit more startup and stuff like that. You do need to have access to digital repeaters or a digital hotspot, so that can add some expense to getting on there. But it can be really rewarding and a lot of fun. Another mode to consider is the HF digital modes. Okay, there are a bunch of them. They range from FT8 to some of the older ones like RIDI and Olivia and all these other weird modes that, they're out there. And there are people that work all of them. You can actually send and receive pictures using slow scan TV using HF digital modes. In fact, just recently, the International Space Station was sending down slow scan TV pictures, and anybody that wanted to receive them could set up their stuff to try to receive them. Maybe you're a little mic shy. You don't want to, talk on the mic. You'd rather type. That may be the mode for you. You can still work the world. In fact, a lot of times with these modes, you can work some really weak signal places in the world that you may not be able to reach with voice. For example, Africa. I've worked South Africa voice a few times, but I'd never worked anywhere else in Africa. And then all of a sudden, when I was playing around with FT8, I was able to get another station in Africa, in North Africa. So a lot of the world opens up to you if you're open to trying different modes. But once again, there's a little bit more of a learning curve to it. You need to have an interface. You have to have a computer. The interface is basically kind of like a sound card. You have to have some way to get the signal from the radio into the computer and from the computer back out into the radio, because that's what's going to transmit. HF digital modes also lend themselves well to EMCOM, or emergency communications. You can get a lot of data across that's typewritten or typed text that you don't have, that you cannot get across with voice, and it's accurate. There's no misunderstanding, well, did he say 7 or did he say 11? Because they read the text and it's obviously a 7, and they have some check systems that it makes sure that the data comes across correctly. So if your interest is something along the lines of, emergency communications, then you definitely want to check out some of these HF digital modes. Now, that's definitely not all the things you can do with ham radio, but it's kind of a start to get you thinking, how do you actually want to operate? Where do you want to operate? There's a lot to be said for being comfortable at home, but there's a whole lot to be said for having fun out in a park. So you've got the question of, portability. How portable do you want to be? Power. How are you going to supply power, and how much power do you want to put out? The comfort. I'm obviously pretty comfortable here. I've got my coffee pot in the other room, and I've got my cup of joe. Whereas, if you're out and about, you're not as comfortable. So everything is kind of like you have to find the balance. So take all that into consideration. Maybe even make a little list for the things that you want to do, and start looking for that possible radio based off of that list, because different radios lend themselves to different activities. You obviously don't want to take a 100-pound radio on a backpacking trip. Okay, so consider all of that and make that list and see if you can narrow down what kind of operating you want to do before you start trying to narrow down what radio you want. So that's that. Your brief introduction into some of the different modes. Any questions or comments, comment below. Hit like, hit subscribe. We do appreciate it. Y'all take care, and we hope to see you on the air. 7-3.